our theme for this year is God. And so this year I'm focusing on teaching on God and things related to God, who he is and so on and so forth. So since I feel that I'm an associate pastor here, I will teach briefly on the theme for our year, which is God. And so my title basically is God Today. And somebody will say, oh, but why do you have to teach about God? We know God already. But the question you have to ask yourself is, which God do I know? Which God do I know? Because there are many gods. Which one do I know? When I say I'm praying to God, which one? Do I really know the God I am praying to? You know that in the Old Testament, you read the Old Testament and you see that they knew that there were different gods. So when God called Abraham, he showed himself to Abraham and told Abraham to reveal what he had learned to the people. So Abraham started teaching about God. And so to distinguish what Abraham was teaching from what other people were teaching, the God that Abraham was teaching about was called the God of Abraham. Now, people sometimes think when they say the God of Abraham, it means, Abraham had a personal God. No, it simply means this is the God Abraham knew. It's because he was the only one who knew this God. Abraham was the only one who knew him. And then Abraham taught his son Isaac, so he became the God of Isaac too. And then Isaac taught Jacob about this God of Abraham, so he became Jacob's God. And so we call him the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then later on, this knowledge went beyond the tribe, went beyond Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and went to the nation of Israel. So you'll find he was not called much the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When Israel became a nation, he was called the God of Israel. Because at that time, only Israel knew this particular God. And then in the New Testament, he's the God of our Lord Jesus Christ and the God that we believe in as Christians. But this journey goes way back. Now, sometimes if you don't have this basic understanding, people think that it is a sign of spirituality to say the God of Otabil. And these days you cannot say that. You cannot say the God of Pastor Ransford or the God of Otabil or the God of any pastor, because the God is no longer known by only a few people. He's known now by a lot of people. My God is your God. My God is not different from your God as a Christian. But the Christian God is not the same God as every other God that people worship. And so we will talk a bit about that today. So let me start with Romans chapter 1 verse 20. Romans chapter 1 verse 20 is one of my, many times I preach, I say it's one of my favorite verses. Now, I don't even know which is my favorite verse, but it's one of those verses I really like in the Bible because it gives us a foundation for understanding God. And it says, for since the creation of the world, the invisible attitude, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things which are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So what the passage is saying briefly is that through creation, God revealed himself. And then it also says that God is invisible. Because if God is invisible, how are we going to know him? We cannot see him. How are we going to know him? And the passage says, through his creation, he showed us himself. And so when we read the Bible and we read about creation, we are also reading about the revelation of God. It is God saying, this is me and this is how I am. How do we know? By the way he revealed himself in creation. Are you following that? So we go to my main text for today, which is the first verse in the Bible. The first verse in the Bible, which is, I believe, is the most important verse in the Bible. There are many verses in the Bible, many chapters in the Bible, many books in the Bible, many words in the Bible, but the most important verse, sentence in the Bible is this one. Because if this one is not there, nothing else exists in the Bible. Everything in the Bible is based on this sentence. And understanding Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is critical to understanding God. So I'm just going to stay today with Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and what it is teaching us about God. Let's read it together. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Let's read it together. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And there are many things I can say, but the first thing I want to say about this verse is that it reveals that before the heavens and the earth, there was God. Before the heavens and the earth, there is God. Now, it may seem like a very simple statement, but it's very difficult because it tells us that God is eternal. God is eternal. He has always been, he will always be. He is uncreated. He is unmoved. He is eternal. So the Bible is saying that before there was time, before there was atom, before there was matter, before there was substance, before anything could be, there was God. The earth, the heavens were created by God. What kind of God? The eternal God. The eternal God. Other words for eternal is everlasting. We say God is everlasting. We say God is forever. We say God is endless. We say God is infinite. It is very difficult to think of anything as everlasting, forever, infinite, and eternal, because there is nothing like that. Everything we know has a beginning and has an end. Even if it has not ended, it will end. Everything has a beginning and an end. Even we human beings have a beginning and an end. I read or I watched a documentary about some of the oldest things in the world. And they said most of, some of them were trees, and some of them were ferns and fungus and all kinds of things, plants. And some of them are supposed to have been 300 years, and some are 1,000 years, and there are some which are about 70,000 years, and some go way back. And when you see a tree that has been there for a very long time, you may say that this tree has been there forever. But it has not been there forever. Somebody planted it, and one day somebody will cut it down. They said the oldest animal is a jellyfish that lives somewhere in the bottom of the ocean. And it was said about this jellyfish that it renews its life, so it doesn't die. So when it's growing, getting old, it renews its life, and it's there, and it's there, and it's there. And because it doesn't have many natural enemies wherever it is, it lives for a very long time. Now, you can say something like that is forever. But one day, if a fisherman catches it and fries it, it will not be forever. It will no longer be forever. But God cannot be caught and he cannot be fried. When we say God is eternal, it means there is no possibility ever, any time, for God's life to end. He is endless. He is infinite. There is no beginning to him. There is no end to him. And when we say that God is infinite, it means that God is there, has nothing to become. Do you understand? Nothing to become. God is. So God does not improve. God does not learn. God does not become better. Everything learns and improves, but God does not learn. God does not change. God does not become better. So God, there is no love beyond the love of God. So there is no love that God can say, oh, I love people, but I think if I can love them more, it will be better. There is nothing more, because he has filled up everything that is, and there can be nothing beyond what he is. His love is absolute and perfect. His grace is absolute and perfect. His goodness is absolute and perfect. God cannot be better than himself. Are you? And that's why God doesn't learn. There's nothing you do that will make God say, I didn't know human beings were this bad. Now I've learned. I have to change my ways and become. No. God cannot do that. Because if he becomes that, then he's no longer God. He doesn't improve. Doesn't change his mind. He's always who he is. Now, I know people who say, Pastor, are you really sure God doesn't change his mind? You know? And God doesn't learn, because you read things in the Bible, and I cannot get into all of that. And you read things like, and God repented, or sometimes looks like God is shocked with what people are doing, and all of that. And without sounding too academic, in the Bible there are things that are written to describe God, so that we human beings can understand him. And it is called an anthropomorphism. It means that we have used the ways of man to describe the ways of God. But if we use the ways of man to describe the ways of God, it doesn't mean that God has become a man. It is just that for us to get a concept of who he is, we can only think of him in human terms. That's all. Because who he is, there's no way we can understand except we explain it in human terms. So sometimes you will see those verses and it will seem like that. It is like, the Bible teaches that God knows all things. So there's nothing that happens that he didn't know. There's nothing that happens that shocks God. When Adam and Eve sinned, he wasn't surprised, because he knew. So why did God come acting as if he is surprised? It's like the way we are naturally. When the Black Stars were going to I haven't finished my analogy. When the Black Stars were going to Ivory Coast, all of us knew they will come back. I mean, is there anybody here truly who believe Black Stars will win the cup? Any real Ghanaian? All of us knew they are going and they are coming. When we saw them wearing their kente, we knew it would just be for 1 week. We would just come back. So we knew what will happen. But when they were knocked out, then we say, oh, what have they done? Oh, what have they done? We are acting surprised. But really, were we surprised? No. So we are acting emotionally, but we already knew it was going to happen. That is a very crude way of explaining God's foreknowledge and God's actions in time. There are things he knows will happen, but when it happens, he will feel sad. It's like your child comes to you and she says, Mommy, I won the first prize or whatever in the class. Tomorrow is a speech day. I want you to come and because I'm going to receive a lot of prizes. Now, you know your daughter is going to receive prizes, but when you go and your daughter receives prizes, you won't sit there and say, oh, I knew it. I knew it. She collects the English prize. I knew. Maths. I knew. No. When she wins a prize, you get up as if it's the first time you are hearing it, but you knew it. You knew it. You had foreknowledge, but your actions are appropriate for the time it is happening. Are you getting me? That explains God in a sense. He never learns anything. He never improves. He doesn't become better. Some people say the God of the Old Testament was a very, very wicked God. Then maybe as God was watching human beings, say, these people are, if I'm not careful, I'll kill all of them. So now I have changed my mind about it. No, he didn't change. He's the same God. He's the same God. His mercy is the same. His love is the same. He didn't become more loving in the New Testament. He didn't become more gracious in the New Testament. He wasn't more powerful in the Old. He's the same God at every time, at all times. God is eternal. Now, because God is eternal, you cannot change him. You can't change God. I said you can't change God. Because if you can change God, then the one who can change God has become the God of God. So your prayer can't change God. It's very important. Your worship cannot change God. Your giving cannot change God. Now, the reason this is important is because, God was God by himself before he created anything. The things he created did not make him God. He was God before he created the things. Are you getting me? So, the things he has created, therefore, cannot change him because he was who he was before he created the things. And before he created human beings to have the capacity to worship him, he was God. So whether you worship him or not, he's God. So if you decide, I won't worship God, he's God. If you decide, I worship God every day, he's God. Your worship or non-worship does not change him. He's an eternal God. Are you following that? He's eternal. Now, the reason I'm saying this is important because it affects prayer. It has a direct impact on prayer. When you understand the God of the Bible as eternal, It affects prayer. You say, Pastor, how does it affect prayer? You see, there are gods who need to be sustained. You have to give them food. And when they are hungry and you don't feed them, they will die. You know, sometimes in our traditional settings, they will say something like, an accident has happened somewhere on a bridge, and they'll say, the God here says he needs blood. That's why he caused the accident, so he can drink blood to sustain him. Now, if you're an African and you think that way, then you may also think that our God, the God of the Bible, also needs to be sustained. And if he needs to be sustained, then the way we do it is come and we bow and we worship him. And when we worship him, he's so happy that whatever we want, he gives it to us. Because God is so happy that we've given him fans. Watch it. Because if you think God can change, when I was a young Christian, I was told, people say, when you are worshiping, it's like, you are sitting with your father. You say, Daddy, I want a shoe, or Daddy, I want this, and Daddy doesn't want to buy. Then you go and sit with your father, and you clip his nails, and you remove his socks for him, and you talk to him, and you give him his best food, and then your father's mind will change and give you the thing. And somehow, anthropomorphically, we impose it on God and think that the God of the Bible is changeable. So that if I need something, from now, I'm going to worship every day for 30 days. Because somehow I need to change God. So that God will do this for me. Now, if my worship can change God, I have become God. I have become the God of God. Because I have the key to change him. If I withdraw worship, he gets jittery. If I give him worship, he is happy. That is not the God of the Bible. It may be the God of your ancestors. It may be the God of other religions. But in Christianity, the God of Christianity does not change. So, somebody says, so then I won't worship again. I won't pray again because it won't change God. No, you have to worship. Because when you worship, it doesn't change God. It changes you and brings you in alignment with God. Are you getting that? Let me use a way to illustrate this. If you have every plant, or most plants, let me say, not say every, most plants need sunlight for photosynthesis to survive. And if they are in the shade, although they have good soil, they will wither or get sickly and probably die. But if the plant comes to the sun, it will live. So I want you to imagine God. I'm not saying God is the sun, but I want you to imagine analogically that God is the sun. And his rays are shining on the earth. And there is a plant that needs the sun, but it is in the shade. And it is praying, God, give me sunshine. God, give me sunshine. God, give me sunshine. God says, but you are under a rock. And sunshine does not bend. Sunshine will not bend and say, now you pray. The sunshine will now bend and come and look for you and under the rock. No, it won't bend. So as you pray, God, give me sunshine, the only thing God will do to help you to get sunshine is to move you from under the rock into the sunshine. So what prayer does is that it moves you from where you are to the place where God's favor is, God's miracles are, God's power is. But as for God, He remains the same. As for God, and that is why it is a fallacy to think that somebody, a human being, can be a dispenser of God. Are you getting me? So that somebody, a human being, can distribute God by his choice. No. No human being has that power. God works by himself. He is unchanging. He does not bend to us.